Number 17 is the Confessions of St. Augustine. And how many of you had to read this in college? Wow, just one. This has been when you have one of those, the greatest works of Western literature, this is usually included on those lists. So St. Augustine, the question always comes up, could he be voted in as a saint today? Because St. Augustine was the first party-hardy college student. And we're going to get to that. Is the most famous thing he ever said. And Augustine was kind of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Before there was rock and roll, there was sex and drugs back then. And he led this very desultory life. And he's attending college in Carthage. And he led this life which would not be considered a pure life by the standards back then or today. And he lived with a woman for 13 years, and he had a child out of wedlock by her. So this is kind of the background both of St. Augustine and the background of the Confessions, because when he's around 45, he writes this biography or autobiography of his life up until 45. Now, by that time, he had gone through his conversion, and he had become a card-carrying Christian. But he didn't hold anything back. You know, we talk about the confession culture that we have today, and people go on Dr. Phil, or they go on the woman who just retired with $1 billion. Oprah, yeah, they go on Oprah, and they just tell the most intimate details of their lives. So he writes this autobiography of his life up until around the time he's 45, and he calls it Confessions. It's the first autobiography ever written in the West. And that's one of the reasons it's so famous. Nobody had ever thought before, I'm going to sit down and write a whole book about me. That thought had never hit anybody before, but it hit Augustine. And I know I've used it before, but I'd like some love for the photo. Ooh. Wow. Thank you. The most famous thing that he said in his Confessions is, grant me chastity but not yet. And every college student knows that line. So let's look at that line. But I, miserable young man, supremely miserable even in the very outset of my youth, had entreated chastity of thee and said, grant me chastity and continency, but not yet. I know it's probably a good idea, but I don't want it to happen quite yet. For I was afraid lest thou shouldst hear me soon, and soon deliver me from the disease of concupiscence. That's a word you don't hear a lot. Which I desire to have satisfied rather than extinguished. Now, in modern terms, we would put that slightly differently, but I think, does everybody get it? Yeah. So I have to explain that part?
No. If I put it up in my high school room, I'd have to explain it. And I wouldn't.
So that's the most famous thing he ever said. Here's the greatest theologian that ever lived. Wrote, well, Origen probably wrote more stuff if you add it up, but the most noted author in the history of Christianity, Post-Apostolic. And that is the line he is most known for. He established Catholic doctrine on baptism, on predestination, on justification by faith. I mean, all this stuff. He established the doctrine of the Catholic Church, but that's the line he is most remembered for.
It's the bumper sticker.
Pardon?
Everybody remembers the bumper sticker.
The bumper sticker.
Politicians are looking.
Precisely. And then he writes about his conversion. And I was struck by how similar this is to the descriptions you get from, like, the two Wesleys, for example. John Wesley wrote about his conversion experience. A lot of the reformers wrote about their conversion experiences. And remember, this is 1,000 years before that. So I actually found this pretty exciting that he actually wrote about. I was saying these things and weeping in the most bitter contrition of my heart, when lo, I heard the voice as of a boy or girl, I know not which, coming from a neighboring house. So here he hears this voice off in the distance, and oft repeating, take up and read, take up and read. immediately my countenance was changed, my face, my countenance was changed. And I began most earnestly to consider whether it was usual for children in any kind of game to sing such words. Take up and read, take up and read. Nor could I remember ever to have heard the like. So restraining the torrent of my tears, I rose up, interpreting it in no other way than as a command to me from heaven to open the book and to read the first chapter I should light upon. I grasped open and in silence read that paragraph on which my eyes first fell. Not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lust thereof. No further would I read, nor did I need. For instantly, as the sentence ended, by a light, as it were, of my security infused into my heart. Isn't that magnificent? Here you have the prototypical drunken college student, you know, at a Bulldogs game on a weekend or something. And they open the Bible and put their finger in. And what verse do they find? The one about not being a drunk. The one about not being wanted or practicing wantonness. Isn't it wonderful? And he's converted. That's the beginning of his conversion.
All the gloom of doubt perished away.
Isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful conversion experience. And this was actually used in the Middle Ages to settle disputes. It was actually used in medieval monasteries where there would be two disputes. It wasn't used a lot, but it was used. And there would be a dispute, and the abbot would walk up to the lectern, and he would open the Bible, and he would put his finger in, and he would then read the verse. And that verse would be used to decide the dispute. So people actually used that because Augustine did it. It worked for him. So we should be able to use it too. So I think it's a wonderful description. And both Charles and John Wesley had similar experiences where they heard somebody reading something in another room. Almost always included, if you have a list of the 100 greatest works of Western literature, that sort of thing, it's almost always included on that list because it's so well written. It's the very first autobiography ever written. It shows an amazing, I can't think of the word, an amazing ability to look into himself.
Introspection.
Introspection. Shows an amazing introspection. Battles with food and drink. Hey, we all have, well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have those kind of battles. So it says, I strive daily against longing for food and drink, for it is not of such a nature as that I am able to resolve to cut it off once and for all, and not touch it afterwards, as I was able to do with concubinage. So he's able to give up, you know, running around women. But booze, come on! I gotta draw a line somewhere. And who, O Lord, is he who is not in some degree carried away beyond the bounds of necessity? Whoever he is great. Let him magnify thy name. But I am not such a one, for I am a sinful man. So even Augustine, the founder of half of Catholic doctrine, the greatest theologian in the history of Christianity, a saint, a doctor of the church. And here he is saying, booze? There's booze? So
I can't stick to a diet either.
I can't stick to a diet, and I gotta have my booze. So that's another thing that's nice about it. It's not some lofty tone, you know, written up here in the sky with someone admonishing you and whatnot. He's writing about how he really is. I think it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm a big fan of Bernard of Clairvaux, but if you read Bernard of Clairvaux, he doesn't show a lot of introspection. He shows a lot of speaking from the mouth. But here's Augustine. He's not speaking from the mouth. He's saying, oh, Jesus, I eat too much and I drink too much and I try, but I just can't stop it.